you aren't just who you are. You're also something that changes all the time. You're more like a river than like a rock. You're constantly transforming. The physicist Erwin Schrodinger thought that people were dissipative structures. It's a very interesting idea. So a dissipative structure is a structure that maintains its structural integrity while its elements transform completely. So you know when you let the water out of the sink, you get a whirlpool, right? And the whirlpool is a fairly stable entity, but the water that the whirlpool is made of is constantly changing. That's a dissipative structure. Well, that's what you're like. You maintain your form across time, but your elements are constantly transforming. And people are very, very transformative creatures. You know, we can... Unlike animals, really, because animals are sort of what they are and that's it. I mean, they have some capacity to learn, but not very much. Your typical beaver is acting more or less today like, you know, his great-great-great-great-grandfather was acting 5,000 years ago. There's no real accretion of culture. Whereas with human beings, we transform like mad. I mean, we do that culturally. Things aren't much, there's so many things, for example, that are different now than there were 20 years ago that it's almost impossible to imagine. And then, so we transform on a cultural scale quite rapidly. But we also do that individually. I mean, you guys have all just made the transition to university, just roughly speaking. You know, I'm sure that you're like you were in some ways when you were in high school, but, well, hopefully you're better than you were in high school a whole bunch of ways as well. You should be more mature, but your personality may have transformed substantially. You know, and with any luck, you're not done with your sequences of transformations. Let's say you're socially anxious. Okay, so what happens when you're socially anxious? You go to a party, your heart's beating. Why? The party is a monster. Why? Because it's judging you. And it's judging you, it's putting you low down the dominance hierarchy, because that's what a negative judgment is. And that interferes with your sexual success. And that means that you're being harshly evaluated by nature itself, right? So you are confronting the dragon of chaos when you go into the social situation. And so what do? You're like this, right? You hunch over, and that's low dominance. I'm no threat. It's like, well, that's not going to get you very far. You know, but that's a logical thing to do in the face of a tyrant. So I'm no threat. You know, you look at the king and you're dead. I'm no threat. I'm hunched over. And then what's happening internally? What are people thinking about me? What are people thinking about me? Am I looking stupid? Am I looking foolish? Geez, I'm awkward. I hate being here. Man, I'm sweating too much. It's all internalized, right? It's all self-focused. The eye isn't working. What do you tell people? Don't stop thinking about yourself, because you can't. It's like, don't think of a white elephant. White elephant, white elephant, white elephant. You can't tell someone to stop thinking about something because they get caught in a loop. What you do with socially anxious people is you say, look at other people. Look at them, right? Why? Because if you look at them, you can tell what they're thinking. And then unless you're terribly socialized, and some people are. Some people have no social skills. And so the reason they can't go to a party is because they don't even know how to introduce themselves. Like no one ever taught them how to behave. And so they're really good candidates for behavior therapy, because you walk them through the process of how you actually manifest the procedures that are associated with social acceptability. But most people aren't like that. They have the ability. So if they're really introverted and high in neuroticism, they can usually talk quite well to someone one-on-one. Why? Because they look at them. Well, if I look at you, it's another thing to do if you're ever speaking to a group of people. Never speak to the group of people. That doesn't exist. You talk to individuals, and then they reflect for you the entire group, because they're all entrained. So you look at one person, they broadcast to you what everyone's thinking, and you know how to talk to one person. So it's easy. So as soon as you focus on the person, not you, you push your attention outward, use your eye, you push your attention outward, and you start watching. Well, then all your automatic mechanisms kick in, and you stop being awkward. So there's a biological basis for our social being, and it's extraordinarily important to us how we fit into social groups. Okay, so we've also been trying to figure out what the hell we are, who we are, for thousands and thousands of years. Partly as a consequence of imitation, you know, because I can act you out and that'll sort of help me understand what you're like, and partly as a consequence of articulated communication. A lot of that's storytelling. Now, people have been telling stories for we have no idea how long. I mean, if you go and visit peoples that have no written language and who've been isolated from the rest of human society for, say, tens of thousands of years, and such people still exist, you find that they tell stories, they dance, they act each other out, you know. So we know certainly that the propensity to tell stories and to engage in ritual behavior is far older than our ability to write. I suspect you can push it back at least 50,000 years, although I suspect it's a lot older than that. And so one of the things you might say is that the most stable thing there is about the human personality is its capacity to transform. And that's really something that's worth knowing, you know, because one of the things I can tell you about the great myths of mankind, there's lots of them and they have different themes, but one of the most powerful themes is the way you get yourself out of trouble is to transform your personality. Now you think, you kind of do that every time you learn something, right? Because you learn something and you're a little different than you were before. Hopefully different in a significant way, and hopefully different in a way that helps you solve some problems that you couldn't solve before. So you could say that one of the leitmotifs of being human is, well, if I encounter an obstacle, I can just transform and I can figure out some way of getting around it. And that's something that makes us quite remarkable.